Hello and welcome to the show. I'm very excited, to be honest, and I do feel privileged to have Sue Knight with me today. Thanks for coming, Sue.
You're very welcome.
I
Thank you.
really appreciate it, honestly. Um, my history with the model of NLP goes back quite a while, not as long as yours, because when I was getting interested in the model, I came across your book, and I don't know how long that the first book has been published. NLP in business or NLP for work.
NLP, sorry, I've got a fly buzzing around.
That's
I
all
just
right.
switch phone noises off as well. NLP at work,
That's
which
it.
is always chosen because it's an ambiguous title.
Yeah. No, it's nice. Well, it's nice because the ambiguity means it can apply wherever work occurs.
Exactly. It's like NLP at work. And because I was
Oh
probably
yes.
one of the first to take it into the workplace. So that was also, so it was deliberate. Both.
Yeah, to my understanding of history, you were certainly in the UK and Europe the first to to, to find business applications for NLP,
I
because
wasn't I wasn't the first,
okay,
but I was close to the first. There were two very special guys. Roy Johnson was one. I can't think of the guy, David's surname. Roy Johnson was the reason. He was my influence in terms of it was his example that inspired me to start studying NLP.
yeah, because I can imagine some business people when introduced to some of the early patterns and how they were taught might have thought this is great, but I can't see myself doing that in the workplace.
Oh, well, that's where Roy Johnson and David, they introduced it into BMW to study
Wow.
top salespeople. And I don't think they necessarily used, you know, fixed patterns, but they taught them, they actually modeled the top salespeople in order to find out how come they were so much more successful than some of the others. And so they found out what was, the strapline, the difference that makes a difference.
Yeah.
So they were very authentic in the way that they worked and the way they introduced it. So that was a great lead in.
Yeah. And I've been on your website and I love it. And there's lots there, and it will definitely be in the show notes and stuff. Um, can you give us a little bit about your background? You know how you came to NL the model, or whatever
Well,
you want to say about yourself.
well, as I say, Roy Johnson, he was the reason I came to NLP because I had worked for International Computers Limited. I was in the computer business, but very much in their training department latterly. I'd been in different roles before, technical IT roles. And I was training trainers, salespeople, managers, leaders, or you name it, but
Yeah.
doing all sorts of training like behavior analysis training and a lot of the standard types of training. And I decided to leave. I decided to become independent. Um,
Wow. That's a big decision, I imagine.
it was a big decision. I had a choice. I was offered a job in ICL, which would have been a more administrative role, heading up a particular unit. But I really loved the training, and I thought, well, um, I thought this is the time. I think I wasn't quite 40 then, and I thought, these decisions to make before you're 40, sort of thing. And I went. So I think I had left, and I went on a creative writing course because I wanted to improve the way I wrote my. I was a lot of paperwork then,
Yeah.
handouts, leaflets, and so on, and newsletters. And that's where I met Roy Johnson because he had studied a very good writer and they'd unpacked how this writer wrote in such a
Right.
beautiful way. And as well as learning about writing, I was really curious about this approach that they'd used.
Right.
What was Roy Johnson doing? Because he was doing the studying of the writer. He was a writer, but not in the way this other guy was.
Right.
And he had such a beautiful style in the way that he listened and the way he questioned, and the fact that there was this interesting structure to the way they put this course together. And
Yeah.
he said, well, you should do NLP, so because that's what I've done. And there's this place in London that runs it, and off I went.
Wow.
But
Who did you train with anyone? Who did you train with?
Well, the organization was called UKTC. It was a brilliant organization, UK Training Centre for NLP. And Gene Early was a big influence on that. He was the lead trainer. Robert Dilts presented on it.
Right.
David Gordon presented on it. Barbara, forget her surname now. But a lot of mostly American trainers. Eileen Seymour Watkins, Graham Dawes, they were support throughout the whole. I mean, a remarkable set. It was over a couple of years. And that was a fantastic experience.
What a grounding. You know, as I look back at my early NLP training, I I don't think I had that kind of quality.
It was amazing.
And it makes such a difference, doesn't it, the trainer?
Oh, it was such a shame when that closed down. But in a sense, it had its time and it had its place. And a lot of the really key trainers, I would say, especially in the UK, trained with UKTC.
Right. And if we were to roll back before 40,
yeah,
you know, back to school and university maybe, what were your plans back then as you emerged from school and university? And
it was just, I lived in Liverpool. It was just to have a ball.
are you Liverpool born and bred? Or
yeah.
Wow, I've got a daughter in Ormskirk. We go there a lot.
Oh wow, well it's close, not quite the real thing, but
Ah,
close.
no, I know that. I know they're not Scouse, are they?
Nope.
Are you a red or a blue, Sue?
Red.
Are you? Well, they're having a good season.
They are fantastic.
Did you go to John Moore?
No, I didn't. I didn't go to university at all.
All right, so you
I was quite a rebel, actually.
And some of your early jobs or things that you did?
Oh, I was a computer programmer. Very early on, I joined English Electric as a lecturer in the engineering training centre. So I was that very technical stuff.
Yeah.
But I was taught how to teach in a very traditional way at that time.
Yeah.
So my background, bizarrely, you know, because it's neuro-linguistic programming, my background was in the programming world,
Right.
in the other programming world. So then that was English Electric, and English Electric merged with ICT, which was International Computers Limited, became ICL. It then became subsequently, after I left Fujitsu, was taken over by them. And they had a very sophisticated training program. And eventually I migrated to the non-technical side and started teaching the non-technical things, you know.
Right, well, soft skills.
Yes. So it was a tremendous foundation for me to go independent eventually.
Yeah, and teaching and learning, it sounds to me as though that's been a core thread.
Yes, it became that quite early on. Yeah.
Right. Now, a lot of people listening to this will have only recently been introduced to the model of neurolinguistic. Can't even say it, Sue. Neurolinguistic programming.
Yep.
If you were to, and I'm sure you do this a lot, if you were to sum up the model, good luck with that, by the way. How would you do that? What would you say?
The way of studying, that's very important. It's a way of studying.
Yes.
How we do what we do, particularly the things that we do unconsciously,
Yeah.
and do with excellence.
Right.
So we can reproduce it with consistency.
Right. Okay. So a lot of the audience will be working within the birth world in some way or other.
Yeah.
There will be overlaps, I guess, in terms of business structures, because they, you know, serve within the NHS structures or some other kind of structures.
I don't work exclusively within a business structure. I work for people.
Oh, cool. So, what would you think would be the benefit of learning the model for someone in those arenas?
It's relevant for anybody in any arena, because it's a way of, I say, it's a way of studying what works, what works best. And particularly, it's a way of enabling people to find that for themselves. So most people get in their own way. Most people, in some way, sabotage themselves in all sorts.
Yeah.
Well, that's the kind of, so they can do that with excellence. And so whatever the context, when they learn how to discover how they're doing that in a detailed way,
Yes.
they can make changes. And the most important thing is everybody has excellence. Everybody's got excellence. They might misuse it. They might be a great leader and lead a criminal gang, for example.
Yeah.
Everybody's got excellence. And so with NLP, they can discover the structure of that excellence. Where do they have this resource that they could use perhaps instead of people that they are getting in their own way, whatever they're doing?
Right.
And so it's a way of people kind of tapping into the best of themselves.
Right.
But in a way that they are initially not consciously aware of.
Right. So that writer you were talking about, who is, from his perspective or her perspective, they're producing this fabulous writing, but if you were to ask them how they did it, they might not know.
Well, that's where Roy Johnson came in, because he was studying the writer, because the writer could not have told us the structure. He could have read as examples of his work, and he could have said how he prepared, but that's all.
And he might have a metaphor for it, I suppose.
He had methods for preparation and so on, but there were things, and this is the thing, things that people do with excellence. There's things that they do fluently that they do unconsciously, and they just don't know, and they take it for granted. So this is what Roy Johnson was doing, was finding those things so that we could teach them to us.
Yeah. So the decision points that people who are excellent at something, those distinctions they're making, they are all outside of consciousness largely.
Absolutely. Because that's why NLP is, you don't ask somebody, how do you do that? Because they're not going to give you details that make the difference.
Right. Now I'm remembering back at being a young man. I was 24, 25. I was 30 stone back then, by the way, as well. So if you imagine a midwife walking in 30 stone, looking like a member of the gangs of New York. Well, I tried to get out of the habit of jazz hands, because that's never a good thing when you're a midwife. So I had a number of mentors who were completely outstanding. I would watch them work, and I would kind of crave their skills.
Yes.
Right. If I'd have known what I know now, I would have been, in NLP terms, able to model them.
Exactly.
Right. But how would I have gone about it?
I'm just watching and listening to them, hang around with them.
Right. So the first step would be to absorb what they're doing.
Absolutely.
But how would I begin to add structure to that in terms of teasing out some of those unconscious decision points?
Well, you can ultimately ask, but the purest form of modeling is doing it, just immersing yourself in. There'll be ways that they move. If somebody on my course recently discovered that if you move like them, like them.
Right, because the motor output of the body is the end result of the patterning running.
Exactly. And if you ask yourself, what has to be true for them to be doing this in this way?
Yeah.
It's not an intellectual exercise. It's not a head exercise. It's a whole body immersive.
Right.
However, you can, and you do, learn structures.
Right.
So that you've got those kind of in the background, so you can discover, I know about, the different things, the way people filter their experience, for example, what do they pay attention to, and what do they keep out of their attention?
Right.
What's going on in their mind? Are they picturing things? Are they saying things themselves? In what way are they doing? So there's a lot, there's a mass.
There's loads there. And of course, the words they're using are commentary upon their internal simulation. So the structure in their language will give us clues, won't it?
That was the fundamental, that was the really starting point with NLP, the structure of people's language. There's so many clues about how people are making their experience in the world what it is by the way that they structure their language.
Yeah, I remember reading Dr. Grinder's book, Turtles All the Way Down,
Yes,
and I can't honestly say I understood it first time through, but I was challenged by that know nothing state, which I think
absolutely.
is what you're talking about,
Yes,
is being absorbed with what another is doing
that's
while knowing nothing.
I mean, that's the big challenge for most people because they've been brought up, educated in work to know stuff. And it's like, can we regain that naive curiosity? We say that NLP is about um, not knowing, being really openly curious, which sounds easy, but it's quite
It's
a
not.
skill.
It's not, I guess, because of cognitive bias.
And it's also about being real time and
Right.
be open to the feedback that you're getting. Feedback in the sense of, you know, what's happening when you do what you do, what's your sensitivity to yourself and to other people. So
Right.
that's
And and I guess the feedback's only useful if I've defined my intention,
to find your outcome. Yeah.
your outcome.
You know, you start to learn which things are taking me towards that and which things are taking me away from that.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Now, within the birthing world,
Yeah.
I was talking to a clinical psychologist, professor from Oxford, and they said this, and it's quite startling. They said a third of women who give birth in the UK label their birth as traumatic.
Yes.
200,000 a year,
Yeah.
which is an enormous amount of women who have had an experience of birth that is often unconsciously causing them
Yeah.
suffering. Um, NLP got anything to say to them? Or has the model got anything to offer them?
Absolutely. Because you know, once we learn, you know, obviously there can be very difficult births.
Yeah, of course.
You know, it's like, what do we do with that experience that shapes what we experience
Yeah,
ultimately? So I'm not saying we can eliminate it, but we can find the way to make the best choices for ourselves. So a lot of people make it worse. And a lot of people in, you know, even when you listen to people in run up to birth, what people
yeah,
say to people is just,
yeah. It's horrendous.
it is dreadful. So the expectation is very often. So yes, they can, it's like any situation, most people in some way get in their own way.
Yeah,
Most people make their experience more complicated, more painful. I'm not talking about just birth, I'm talking about
no,
any
life.
life more than it needs to be. There's usually simpler, more resourceful choices that people can make that will
Yeah,
make it the best it can be.
yeah. Although I don't know about you, I mean, I'm a vapor, right? And there's a presupposition within, I'm not a smoker at least. There's a presupposition within NLP that people don't need fixing, all their patterns are working perfectly. You know, I don't have to remember to vape, I never forget to vape. It always occurs given certain triggers.
Yes.
So that this pattern is working perfectly, right?
So you are consistent.
Yes. Well, it doesn't.
You're
Yeah.
cons-
Yeah. Same if I was afraid of spiders, you know, I don't have to remember to be afraid. I'm afraid before sometimes I've even consciously noticed the spider.
yeah.
You know, so the patterns are working perfectly. But
Oh,
given that they're outside of consciousness and they are habitual,
yes.
uh, how 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 can I change it?
You learn the structure of them. You learn how to discover the structure.
Right.
So, you know, there'll be things as an example.
Go on.
Um, you know, people approach situations and they might tell themselves something. Often people, you know, if you spring something on somebody, they'll often tell themselves, maybe I can't do that, or this is going to be difficult, or
Right.
and even the tone of voice or whose voice they're hearing in their head will make a difference. And
Right.
they shape their experience even as they started. And then, you know, what do they do next? You know, what are they? So I think it was
Right.
Stephen Covey, you know, wrote the 7 Habits of Highly Effective Leaders. He said, there's a stimulus, something happens, whether it's a spider or a birth or whatever,
Yeah.
and we respond to that stimulus
Right.
in some way. what people usually don't realize is there's a gap between the two. It could be microseconds. It's what we do in that gap that determines how we respond.
Right. Right.
And
So,
that's what most people are unaware of what they're doing in that gap.
yeah, because it feels like an automatic response with no gap.
That's right.
So the challenge for an individual is to slow this really fast process down in some way
Yes.
in order for them to,
Or to start noticing, or work with somebody who's noticing with them. I mean, that's what I do on my training programs. It's,
yeah,
I might get them to spell a simple word, for example, and they may not know how they do that. If I
right,
ask you, for example,
yeah.
how are you at spelling?
I have an auditory strategy, so so you already know.
Okay. So, okay. So if you spell phenomenon, how do you do it?
Well, I can't. For I can't. I can't spell it. So
So there you go.
I'm aware of, because I've been around this stuff a while. I'm aware that there is some kind of image up there, but it's blurred. And
Right.
then I'm aware of myself going ph, is it eo, and then it doesn't turn up.
And so isn't it interesting that
Yeah,
you looked up in that direction, first of all, to
yeah,
where you see that blurry images? You've already told yourself you can't do it. So you're
yeah,
successful in that. You've proved that to yourself.
yeah,
And then you looked away consistently from where that blurry image is. Isn't that interesting? It's like saying, look, this word's spelt in this.
yeah.
I'm not going to look at it because I do it if I look at it. And
this
then
does this doesn't work on radio, but Sue is actually describing what I'm now aware that I did. I looked up, looked away,
yeah,
felt uncomfortable, bit embarrassed,
that you can't do it.
said I can't do it, and then
Look,
tried to sound it out.
exactly.
Yeah,
Even though you've got this image, albeit blurry, up there.
yeah.
Yes.
I learned the spelling strategy a long, long time ago, and I've not taken the time to install words or practice. That's the truth of it. But
That's
my adopted son, when he was 8, he came home with spelling words, and he was struggling to spell. So I used to stick them on my head and put each of the letters in different colours. And then I told him that he has a camera inside and he can take a picture, and I'd ask him to take a picture, close his eyes, and tell me what colour each of the letters were. And we did that consistently over a few weeks, and then it was automatic.
yeah.
And he's a good speller, and I'm not.
Well, you are, but you're not.
I'm not. Yeah, I have the internal structures, the neurophysiology. I could learn it.
You have an interesting pattern for being perverse.
And you've only just met me.
Yeah, it's a bit.
How did you know that? I remember when I started to learn NLP, and I was really into it because it came to me. It sounds melodramatic, but it felt life-saving in many ways.
I think it
You
does.
know, and my wife, the first wife, subsequently died, and when she died, the model was very important to
Yeah.
me in terms of managing what was going on in my life at the time. But early on, my children used to say to me, "Dad, stop it. You're using your NLP voice."
Oh, yes, that's a nice.
I was a nightmare early on. And when I learnt the meta model, my
Which
goodness, it cost me more friends than I won.
the model about language, and it comes with a government health warning.
It does.
These,
My partner would say, you always leave your shoes in the hallway, and I'd say always.
these things are designed for you to apply to you
Yes,
first and foremost. When you
yes,
start trying to therap other people with them without, that structure within yourself, it will
yeah,
piss them off big time.
yeah,
It's like you do it to yourself. That's the thing.
yeah. And I'm guessing the model can apply in a really deep way in the context of relationships.
Anything, absolutely. Relationships, sport, music, arts, business, leaders, you name it. There's no place, I don't think, where,
Right.
because it's a way of studying what's happening. So, like, where is that not relevant?
Yeah. and it applies to human beings. So whenever there's a human being, the model has an application.
Yes, I mean, it's not an and it applies to human beings, it applies to human beings.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you've been independent, since around the age of 40. How have you found your work evolving and changing? I mean, but could you give us a kind of an example of a month or in your life in terms of what you're doing with the model?
Well, currently, because of COVID, I'm working online,
Yeah, I love Zoom now.
which I love.
Yeah, me too.
So I'm running programs, mainly now open programs. So, for example, I'm in the middle of what's called a master practitioner at the moment,
Oh,
and I've
nice.
got people from about 5 different countries on there. I
Wow.
think in the last year, we worked out there's only one continent that hasn't been represented on my course,
Wow.
and that's Antarctica. If there's anybody from Antarctica listening, we would like to take that. But there's a beauty of that people, I mean, even when I do courses in person, people come together from different countries. And I do a lot of work in India, I have done. Um, with Zoom, people can, and my courses are very intimate, they're very personal. And people
Yeah.
say, well, can you achieve that on Zoom? And I think, absolutely you can. It's
Yeah.
just so. So, for example, every day, these 3 weeks in the afternoon, I'm running a program online with about 20 people at the
Yeah.
moment. Um, I'm going to the UK next week to finish recording my audio book of
Yeah.
NLP work because other people have recorded it before. I've never done it in my own voice. So
Yeah.
asked me to, that's quite a big commitment to do
That is
that.
I was the voice on my own audiobook
All
for
right.
Pinter and Martin. It took 28 hours and it was arduous for me. I experienced it as arduous.
But
Um,
for me,
yeah,
well,
but
that was interesting because I thought, how am I going to do this? Because I don't normally read anything when I'm training. It's sort of
no,
done real time. And so I did find a way to
yeah,
make it very fluent, I think,
yeah.
and enjoyable for myself because just reading exactly as it's written, that was
Very tricky when I'm like you. I'm quite extemporaneous in terms of presentation, and I got into a flow of it and a rhythm, so
yeah,
it worked. And of course, there's always little tweaks in the edit that
yeah,
can have. So there's a lot of birth workers that, like you and like me, I discovered through COVID that I prefer being at home.
yes,
And I've now trained in America, Dubai, Germany, Switzerland, that
yeah.
wouldn't have happened otherwise, right? So I've made a transition to Zoom and I thoroughly enjoy it. A lot of birth workers have had to do that. Did you find that transition? I mean, how did you handle the transition to teaching on Zoom?
Well, when the first, because I'm in France, and the first lockdown was an extreme lockdown here. So I live at my home, and there was even I think a 1 kilometer radius within which you could move, or you had to have a form to say. So
Wow.
I cycle a lot, so I couldn't cycle in that sort of radius. I mean, you could go around in a circle,
Run
but
in a circle.
and I just started thinking about how I was using all the NLP years of learning I've had, how I was using it in the moment. And I just started speaking it, on video. I recorded through Zoom and
Yeah.
uploaded it to YouTube.
Yeah.
It was like a daily reflection.
Yeah.
And a lot of people started to follow that. So I got into this using Zoom in this way.
Yeah.
And then it was very natural progression to do a first course, to start doing the courses that way. It
Yeah.
just felt really natural. I'd done these videos. I mean, it's a different process to training on, but it really just felt, and I had the company of all these beautiful people online with me while, theoretically I was
Yeah.
solitary confinement. That was
A-
a gift.
And it cuts down overheads for students and for you.
Yes, but
Makes
it
the
enabled me.
training more accessible.
I made it much cheaper than it would be in person so that it was accessible to people because I felt that people needed this, especially at
Yeah.
this. how could I make it available to them? So yes, all of
Yeah.
that.
I I was going to say something about working on Zoom. There are a few NLP trainers out there that, you know, they say things like NLP is a contact sport. You know, you need to be present and all of that. But that's not been my experience for sure. And it sounds like not yours.
Well, that's kind of a contradiction, because NLP is about being able to do whatever you wish to do in whatever context you wish. So,
Yeah.
it's like saying, oh, we can't use it there. It's like somebody saying, well, there isn't enough time to do that. Well, Richard Bandler, one of the founders, say, you can do whatever you want in the time that you've got. It's just what you influence is the way that you do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Without a doubt. So, thank you very, very much for your time today. I know there are people listening who are just thinking about starting their journey into the model. You know, they see the value, they want to access something to learn more. What advice would you give to a newbie?
Um, I would say read my book.
Of course, we'll be
Well,
in the link, and subscribe to your YouTube channel and
yeah,
check out your webpage. All of those will be in the links.
because the book I did, you said you read
Did
Turtle Way Down and you didn't
I'll,
really understand it.
no,
And
that was yeah, but I wouldn't recommend that book early on.
that's what I'm saying. So when I read some of those books, I thought they're not particularly accessible. They're great, but they're not particularly. So that was why I wrote NLP at Work, was to make it an easy read, accessible to everybody as an introduction.
Yeah,
And then often when people have read that, they often come to me for training, having read my book,
yeah,
because it's given them a flavour of me and
yeah.
what it.
And I mean, let's as someone who is a professional birth worker, a midwife, a doula, a yoga teacher, antenatal teacher, they could come on your course, and what you teach them, they will be able to apply.
Oh, absolutely. Everything is designed for people as they are, where they are, wherever they are. So the program I'm doing at the moment, which is the master level, people do a project and they choose their own area.
Right.
Amazing, what they choose. I mean, one lady's just produced a beautiful project on, she plays the cornet and
Oh,
how to keep playing when you make a mistake, for example,
very good.
which is like so relevant to so many other areas of life. How do you keep going when something's not gone quite right? But you choose specific moments. And I've had people model how to handle specific moments in grief, all sorts of things. There are examples of projects on the web.
Yeah, so I suppose someone would start with either a practitioner program.
Yes.
Um, could you just give us a little bit of a flavour for how your practitioner program runs?
Yep.
And maybe this will go out towards the end of November, and maybe some information about some courses that are coming up.
Well, the practitioner program runs afternoons,
Right?
a 3-week period. Um, it's very interactive. Um, the great thing with Zoom is you can use breakout rooms, so people do
Yeah.
practice in that time. So they will learn these, if you like, these tools for studying experience.
Yeah.
They'll practice those with each other. I'd say it's quite a profound experience for most people. It's because there's a tremendous spirit on the program. So people are learning in this way. We give them homework. I think the beauty about doing it on Zoom and it not being all the time in person is it actually relies on people doing some more for themselves,
Yeah.
being owned by them, which I think is actually a real bonus. I would say that the standards have gone up and up over time.
And that's my experience, that I thought the depth of learning of students would diminish, and the opposite.
Absolutely.
The opposite.
Because
Yeah.
they get used to being online, they link with each
Yeah.
other online.
Yeah, and I now include some pre-learning, which kind of primes the students for when we get together. Thank you very much, Sue. Would you like to make mention of where people can get in touch with you? It's all going to be in the show notes. But if someone wants to reach out, get in touch.
They can email me at sue@sueknight.com. It's SUEKNIGHT.com. And that's my website as well. If you put Sue Knight in NLP, it'll probably
it comes up. Yeah. Thank you very much for being so generous with your time, Sue, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much, and I wish you the best too with all such key work that you're doing. So
thank you, and thanks for listening. We're done.
Thank you.
Hold on.